Welcome to the Forest Analytics Landing Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Russell. In this podcast, we'll talk about how data and analytics are transforming the forest products industry. We'll share how a research-based approach to analytics can empower your forestry organization to make better decisions with your data. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's podcast. This week, I want to talk about pandemic assistance to U.S. forest products companies. Now, certainly the pandemic has led to a lot of economic turmoil over the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. But there's also a lot of great information and a lot of support that governmental agencies have provided to companies to kind of survive the pandemic. And so in this podcast, I'll talk about really two programs that provided direct relief to the U.S. forest products industry. And I'll say that this work was recently summarized in an article in the Forest Products Journal that's just out this month. And so I'll be sure to include a link to that article in the notes for this podcast. And that article is open access. And so anyone can read it from wherever you are. And so again, I mentioned how important the COVID pandemic was to accessing and to impacting many economies across the globe. It was just a tremendous challenge that many companies faced as they were going through, particularly the beginning of 2020 into the summer of 2020, when many industries were shut down. Now, as it turns out, the forestry industry, forest products were deemed essential. Certainly, everyone can remember demands on things like toilet paper and other kind of basic household needs that involved paper products that were happening there in the middle of 2020. So there was an incredible amount of demand for our forest resources. And so the industry getting that essential status, at least in the U.S., was really important to keeping many industries and many companies afloat. And so one of the programs that provided direct relief was the Paycheck Protection Program. And so this was a program that was administered through the U.S. Small Business Administration, or PPP. Many businesses of all kinds, forestry is just a small slice of that, received PPP loans. And so these loans were a tremendous amount of resources given out to companies to keep their workers on payroll. That was really the main thrust of this program. So by the time the program closed, there were nearly $800 billion allocated to U.S. companies as a part of the PPP. And most of those loans, over 90% of them, were fully forgiven. And so just a tremendous amount of resources given out to companies. Another program that was really more specific to the forest industry was the Pandemic Assistance for Timber Harvesters and Haulers program. Now, this was one that really provided direct relief to timber harvesting and timber hauling businesses. And to apply, companies had to express and provide evidence that they experienced a gross revenue loss of more than 10% in 2020 compared to what they saw in 2019. And so it was a really specific program that was a tremendous resource to the logging community. And this program, the PATH program as it's called, was administered through the Farm Service Agency in collaboration with the U.S. Forest Service. And so up to $200 million was available to these businesses in the form of direct payments. And these weren't loans. These were just direct payments that were set to a maximum value of $75,000. And so if we look at the data, all the PPP data are available online through the Small Business Administration's website. And so it's a tremendous, large amount of information available there. And so if you query it out to kind of look at all of the industries related to agriculture, forestry, and kind of look more deeper at the industries specific to forestry, things like logging, paper product manufacturing, paper mills, veneer, plywood, and wood products manufacturers. You get a lot of companies that applied for the data. And so it's a tremendous amount of information that's available there. If you look at the PPP loans, forest products companies received over 35,000 loans, or about 4.7 billion through the program, basically in the first year that it was opened. And so a tremendous number of loans made out to folks. If you look at the distribution of the different sectors within the forestry community that received PPP loans, by far, the logging industry received the most. So the total loan value that was given to logging businesses through PPP was $629 million. And that was spread across about 12,000 different loans. Now, in that example, if you were to sum up all the jobs that were supported by those companies in logging that received the PPP loans, it was over 65,000 jobs. And so just a tremendous number of folks, even in that one industry of logging, that were supported through the PPP program. If you look at some of the other industries, other wood container and pallet manufacturers, sawmills, other mill workers received in the hundreds of millions of dollars and supporting over tens of thousands of jobs in those specific industries. And so just an incredible amount of jobs supported and of value in terms of monetary loans that were mostly forgiven were provided to those industries. If you look at most of the PPP loans, especially to the forest products industry, about 61% of them were given out at an amount less than $50,000. And so not necessarily large loans that were given out, but lots of small loans, particularly to folks in the forest products companies. If you look at where they were distributed, you can have a look, and California was the top state that received PPP loans to its forest products industry. But generally, other states with a strong forest industry base and a large number of workers in the forestry sector received the most amount of loans. And so you can think of states like not only California, but also Oregon and Washington, Texas, New York, Wisconsin, and Michigan, all receiving quite a bit of PPP loan amounts to the forest products industry. Now, if we switch gears, we can look at the PATH program. So again, this is the more specific program really designed for timber harvesters and haulers. They received just over 5,000 payments for a total of just shy of $200 million to the program. And so these funds were given out in late 2021. And so this was kind of after the initial impact of COVID hit, but while companies were still struggling. If you look at the distribution of who received the loans, the timber harvesters received the most payments, about 45% of the payments, while timber haulers received the fewest payments at about 22%, and the least amount if you were to look at all of the payments across the board. And so there were many companies that received money based on the fact that they had both harvested timber and hauled timber. And so there are many businesses that are involved in that across the U.S. And so a little more deeper look into the PATH data. One of the things that folks reported on their PATH application was how much money they lost as a result of the pandemic. And those 5,000 or so companies that reported $1.27 trillion in lost revenue between 2019 and 2020. I was really impressed with that number. I thought I was wrong when I first calculated that 1.27 trillion value, but it is what was reported across those thousands of companies that received a PATH payment. If you have a look at the distribution of where the most PATH payments were provided, a lot of states in the Southeast, Mississippi, Alabama, received quite a few PATH payments, along with states like Maine and states like Wisconsin received quite a few PATH payments as a part of the PATH program. One of the things I have in the table is in the paper is a table that lists kind of all the different states, kind of states or rows, and then the different numbers and amounts of loans provided to each state. If you're interested in kind of looking at your state and how it might have compared to others as it relates to these payments provided to forest products and timber harvesting businesses in the U.S. I think that's going to be a really valuable resource kind of moving forward as we talk about kind of the health and the viability of some of these different companies as it relates to different strengths of the logging workforce, of the forest products industry, and how it relates to just the overall health of the resources themselves and of the people that work for those. And so kind of in conclusion, if you add up all the money given to these forest products and timber harvesting businesses, they received about almost $5 billion of federal funds through the PPP and the PATH programs. Over 35,000 PPP loans were acquired from these companies that kept almost, if you add up all the jobs, almost 500,000 jobs and workers on payroll. And so there's a tremendous amount of impact just from the PPP program itself. And also with the PATH program, with over $200 million in payments provided by that program, there was just a tremendous value of economic assistance to the forestry sector as it relates to logging and timber harvesting and hauling. And so again, I'll link to the paper that you might read for more information, but I just wanted to kind of summarize the importance of these direct payment and loan programs as they relate to the forest products industry. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Forest Analytics Landing Podcast. For more information on how data and analytics can empower your organization, visit arbor-analytics.com.